Great stuff. So once again, good morning to everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. We're really grateful to have you all. I know that we received about 5 requests for the recording this morning. Obviously the time hasn't suited the people so much, but this is really we're really just trying to see how this is working out. Whether this time is suitable for everyone. I think the approach today is really just to share experiences. I think when we first looked at COVID, or when we first had our first webinar, there was a lot of unknowns at that point in time. We've now reached a place where I think when there's a 26th of August, we'll pretty much be 5 months into lockdowns. That would be April, May, June, July, August. Yeah, 5 months into lockdown. So what was 3 weeks has now turned out to be 5 months. I think for many people, there's different emotions that everybody's going through right now. The reality of this new norm is daunting for many people, and so, but we're grateful to make it to another day. And I think in business as well, I think our hearts are so torn between individually surviving day by day in our businesses, but also we are heartbroken by fellow business owners that have had to close their doors because it's just been, it's just too much right now. So what we're seeing right now is it's very difficult for many of us. As a consultant to many business owners, one of the chats is, the exit strategy. For some people, one of the chats has been the exit strategy, how to exit. So as part of the pivot, it's not, obviously your why remains the same, but it's how to exit that particular business operation and look at a different business operation. So those are some of the challenges that one is going through right now. I think one of the other biggest challenges that one is going through right now is, and I think this is something that we really discounted when we went into the lockdown, is mental health. And I think people have discounted mental health. And it may not be you as the leader or the business owner that's experiencing the mental health, but it may be your staff that are working for you. Right now it could be them that they're experiencing mental health issues because of, I was chatting to Brenda yesterday. It could be mental health just because of the fatigue, lockdown fatigue. Or as I often think of it as cabin fever, where we kind of locked up. And it's not so much that because I think we're being very productive working from home, but it's not really so much about being that, but more than having the freedom to go out, to wherever we would like to go out. I think that's the biggest challenge right now. So this morning, I'm just going to open my slides this morning and just touch in terms of what we'll be covering this morning, and then maybe what I will do is, obviously between slides I'll come back and maybe we can, because of the size of the group this morning, we can share on different experiences that regarding what I'm speaking about this morning. I'd like to share and hear what's out there, what have you heard, what experiences that you've been going through, just in terms of this lockdown. So I'm going to share my screen. Just hold a minute. Let's just share my screen quickly. Okay, so this morning, this morning's webinar is really just a recap of everything that we've gone through thus far. It was very positive to hear some of the participants of the prior webinars just sharing of their experiences in terms of sharing their experiences, in terms of the benefit that they've received out of these webinars. I think of one client whose feedback to me was, Mario, it's really looking good. I've made some of the changes that you and your presenters have recommended. One of my clients came back with some feedback to say that he had a workforce of 35. He has now decreased his workforce to 21, to meet the current capacity demand that there is out there. And so in doing so, he said that he's finding that he's able to see profits that he didn't see prior to lockdown. So and prior to this COVID pandemic. So it's a positive thing. There's some positive feedback coming out. So sometimes it takes a crisis for us to act and to make hard changes in our environment and in our businesses. And sometimes these hard changes, these changes, as we have referred to as pruning. Some of these, when one prunes, you have to cut off, and that cutting off sometimes is painful. And so with this particular client, it is really positive to hear, because he was, prior to COVID, it was hard for him. And so when COVID hit, it accelerated or compounded what he was experiencing. And so when he had to make these changes and these hard decisions, it's interesting to hear the feedback and to hear the positive feedback around coming back regarding his business now beginning to thrive. So not only moving from surviving, now he's moving to thrive. He's beginning to thrive. And so that's really positive to hear. Another, some other feedback we heard that I've received was that some of the guys have just kind of focused on the content that we presented in prior webinars, just to, so that they gave us, when the chips were down, all they did was take the content and work through the content. And what they're finding is that they're certainly finding a turnaround, a positive turnaround in their businesses. So yes, it's really positive. This morning's topic we're speaking about is stabilization. So as I said, we're 5 months into lockdown, and this lockdown, we've heard some positives, and yes, we've heard some of the negatives. Some of our favorite coffee shops that are no longer going to be, some of our favorite tourist destinations that we would normally visit are no longer, that they've taken such strain that they've had to close their doors. So it's really, so yes, the facts out there are real, and we're going to see that, we're going to discuss that a little bit more as we go through this, to speak about the stabilization. But right now, what we're finding is that people have really gotten into, or business owners have gotten into survival mode, where it's really about keeping the boat afloat. It's doing the necessary to keep the boat afloat right now. And what we're finding because of that, what we're finding is that there has been a decrease in the levels of compassion in dealing with people, because often people are putting themselves first in order, because they are now in a survival mode, putting themselves first, and then the compassion is coming later. And so as a leader or as a business owner, one is finding that, right now, it's a bit difficult. One is obviously seeing the lack of compassion coming from, either your clients or staff or suppliers or, all of those, and one has to deal with it in this time. And also looking at the daunting facts that we're facing daily in South Africa. And we're going to speak a little bit about that. We speak about some of the things that we're experiencing in South Africa, and some of of the things, what the projections are looking like. So, we have to look at our external environment as business owners, and just look to see what is projected out there, and how do we then begin to, first of all, stabilize, how we begin to assess our options, and then making the best option, therefore, how do we go about pivoting and then moving into our growth phase thereafter. So it's very important just to understand right now that we need to, yes, it's all about stabilization, and things are changing so fast, things are changing so fast. And many of us right now, because of the what we're experiencing in terms of the pandemic, many of us experiencing various forms of anxiety. As leaders, I think personally, I'm gonna share with you, as a leader, I've never experienced the amount of anxieties that I feel right now. But it's really about unpacking those anxieties, putting them into boxes, assessing them as to whether we have control over them or we don't have control over them. So whether it's in our circle of influence or not in our circle of influence. And if we don't have control over them, letting them go. I had a client call me the other day having an issue with a staff member. And it's, because they can't afford to pay their staff, it's about letting the staff go. But sometimes that hasn't been the easiest, so they've negotiated short time with staff, and staff have said, oh, well, we're resigning, we're not prepared to put up with this. And so there's those challenges right now. So what you're finding is that people are very, I would like to say, have, the short tempers right now. So yeah, it's just really taking this, and it's about how do we stabilize within our businesses right now? How do we come to this point of stabilization, and try to navigate ourselves through this right now? Obviously, we go back to some of the characteristics that I've been chatting about. So some of the characteristics that have helped me in this time is remaining focused. So when we're having, obviously we've got all these anxieties, and sometimes these anxieties are, for some, anxieties may be, staff productivity may be an anxiety right now, where your staff productivity is not where it should be. Why? Because staff are also experiencing this lockdown fatigue. Staff are also experiencing this cabin fever, particularly staff that have been working from home. And staff that have been working on site have the anxieties that they're experiencing are, man, am I going to get COVID? Are my family going to get COVID? So they've also got anxieties that they're dealing with right now. But the important thing right now is to remain focused and to say, okay, so what are these anxieties, and write these anxieties down, so really have a sense of self-reflection, and look to see what are these anxieties am I experiencing right now. Focus on them, okay? Because, some of them may be, maybe my debtors are not paying me, so cash flow may be a problem. Okay. So if it's in your, if we can control it, then put together a plan of action on how to control it. Okay. So, put together a credit policy, a credit management policy, where you're saying, okay, if a client doesn't pay me after 1 month, okay, that's fine. We understand it's COVID right now. If they don't pay me after 2 months, let's have the chat about, should we suspend services? Are you happy for us to suspend services during this time? And if they say, no, that's not a problem. But if they don't pay you after 3 months, then it's like, you've had the conversation with them, you now then suspend the service. And we've had to do that with a number of our clients. Particularly clients that are closed right now. We've got a few clients that are in the, restaurant industry, restaurant and food and beverage, and they've closed right now and they can't open. Particularly those that, or they haven't chosen to open. Let's put it that way. So there's some that can open because restaurants can open right now, but there's some that haven't chosen to open because they're more of a social club rather than a restaurant per se. So it's really about taking those anxieties and then putting them into boxes and then determining whether you have control over them or you don't have control over them. And if you've got control over them, put together a plan of action right now. Look at your short-term tactics to address those concerns. Then it's about, and obviously those that we don't have control over, it's about releasing that. We don't have control over it. And really about having faith right now. The next thing, obviously, I'm going to speak about besides the agility, I'm going to speak about is authenticity right now. Because I think one of the key things in this time is really about being honest, one, with yourself, and two, with your stakeholders. When I mention your stakeholders, with your staff, being honest with your staff, being honest with a fellow partner in your business, honest with your suppliers, honest with, being honest with your customers right now. But it's really about reaching the place of really just being totally honest. So in your self-reflection, and when you're putting stuff into boxes, it's about being honest as well, totally honest. What is underpinning my anxieties right now? And so yeah, what I'd like to do is if anybody would like to share any experiences right now, please feel free to raise a hand, and then I will unmute you. If you just to share any experiences that you may, that you're going through, or other business owners are going through right now, just in these areas, and how this concept of focus, authenticity, and agility have helped you right now. Because obviously we've spoken about the authenticity, but the next thing is the agility. So one, it's about then setting up the strategy or the tactic, and then adjusting and being flexible to go down that road of implementing that tactic. If anybody's got anything to share, feel free to raise a hand. I will unmute you, and then you can share. If not, we'll continue. We'll continue. But yeah, that's pretty much during this time. Those characteristics are really important, just to get us through and navigate us through this time of that focus, being authentic. So being real, being truthful with yourself, and then having the ability to be flexible and flexible to navigate through the situation. Okay, so I'm gonna continue. Sorry, I'm just gonna share this. Okay, let's go back and share the screen. Okay, so we've looked at obviously the focus, agility, authenticity. The next model obviously is a model that I've recommended that it helps us through the stabilization process. The next model is a model that really will help us through the stabilization, navigate our business to a point of stabilization. And obviously it's a stabilize, assess, pivot grow model that, recommended by Henley Business School Africa. And so it's a model that one looks at to help us through, through these uncertain times right now. So right now, one of the things is when we reach the stabilize, or I often look at it, I often say we need to pause. So in trying to stabilize our businesses, sometimes, or to try and stabilize everything around us, sometimes it's just to stop, look around, and note all the facts that are at hand at the moment. Some of the facts that I wanted to share with you is there's a prediction, an economic prediction, that our economy is going to contract by 7.2%. So no growth, because we remember prior to COVID we were battling to grow. I think we were probably sitting at about just under 1% growth, 1.2% growth. Now we are looking at a 7.2% contraction in terms of our economy. that is some of the, that's some of the facts that are in front of us. We hear about job cuts. We hear about it daily. If I'm not mistaken, I know that within the US, and I know this is a US stat, but in the US there was talks that they had reached over 30 million. So the unemployment rate had reached over 30 million probably about a month to 6 weeks ago. So they had reached over 30 million unemployment. And you know what? We are not exempt from that here in South Africa. We are experiencing job cuts daily. So we're hearing of job cuts daily. We're hearing of possible retrenchments daily. It's become a common thing right now, both locally and globally. So it's not a thing of just it's a South African thing. I think globally, this is a global phenomenon right now. Some of the other facts around is our pandemic. I mean, the rate of infections that we're experiencing right now. That we are obviously still. I quote Dr. Zweli Mkhize yesterday that said that we are probably about a few weeks away from our from reaching our peak. For many of us, we thought that we had reached our peak, and we haven't. That's the reality before us right now. So there's so many people, and then obviously the fatigue that people are experiencing. So right now it's really about balancing. What we're balancing is we have to balance staff production versus making the sales. Ensuring that we're making our sales so that the cash can come in to meet those sales. And it's really about cash is king. We spoke. I think Melissa spoke about that in a prior webinar where she spoke about cash being king right now. And very importantly, it's about making sure. I mean, right now it's about making sure that we. And then I think one of the other things that you mentioned is about continue taking that step forward. So whilst we may be experiencing all of this right now, and whilst we're pausing, we need to, in our minds, there should be no option to stand, but the option, it's about taking that step forward. So right now, so in our pause, it's about looking at those facts, noting all the facts, and then, but it's about how do I take the next step forward? And that should be your mindset right now. How do I take the next step forward? In assessing, it's about, yes, we've got all the facts. Once we've established all the facts, it's about looking at how do these facts impact my business, first and foremost. So how am I impacted as a business owner? So it's about bringing the external environment, bring it within your business now and saying, how do these things impact my business? That's the first thing. And secondly, what options do I have? What options do I have before I can go ahead and take the next step, which is pivot? What are my options that I have in my business right now? And I think that's very important. So in my assessing, so yes, we've paused. We look at all the facts ahead of that are ahead of us, the facts that are impacting our businesses, and we look at how it's impacting our businesses. What are the options that I have available to me? And then it's about looking at my best option for my business. Okay, so it's like, these are all my options. What is the best option for my business? And then it's about pivoting your business or changing the course of direction to make the best option for your business. So that's, and for some, the best option may not be the easiest option. I'm going to say that again. The best option may not be the easiest option. Brenda and I often have the chat about when Brenda often speaks about head and heart. And what I've experienced during this time is that when my head and my heart are in conflict, when I'm thinking something and my heart my emotions are in conflict, I find that it begins to almost drain my energy. It begins to, because when I'm in conflict, it's something, and that's where your anxieties also, arise from, because there's a conflict between my head and my heart. And sometimes it's about selecting. So when I'm sometimes have to make the best option for my business, it's not the easiest option, because sometimes your head and your heart may go into some conflict. And really speaking, excuse me, right now, sometimes an emotional decision may not be the best decision. So sometimes one has to really weigh up your head and your heart right now. But really speaking, one has to then put your business first. So it's about so yes, you as an individual, it's only natural that you're going to be thinking about things. You're going to have feelings and emotion about things, maybe emotionally charged about something. But the important thing right now is that your business comes first. It's about putting the business first and making sure that the business runs, for the long-term benefit of the business, rather than you as an individual. So sometimes that option may not be the easiest option. It's not the best option, it's not the easiest option. And then so right now I'm going to say this yet again. Sometimes there may be conflict between head and heart, and sometimes we then have to make the decision for our business that is best suited for the business, rather than for us as individuals or for the stakeholders around us, if we want to see the business remain sustainable into the future. Okay, and then obviously this is one of the things I thought I'd really want to go back and just look at, because this has been a big thing for me. Is your mental resolve to this agility. It's mental resolve to being flexible. And it's easy to say, yeah, no, that I can make the necessary changes. Oh yes, I will do it, and yes, I can change. And that's theoretically yes, from a textbook, yes. But in practice, how easy is it? And maybe during this time, I'm just going to take some time for people to, if anybody's got anything to share, any experiences to share in terms of how they've been in terms of their mental resolve to the flexibility or agility. Which quadrant they see themselves in, quadrant 1, quadrant 2, quadrant 3, or quadrant 4. And then I'm just going to stop sharing for now. And if anybody would like to raise a hand, I'm quite happy to open up to anyone that would like to share, just in terms of those quadrants, and where one sees themselves, in terms of those quadrants. Are we seeing ourselves? Are we seeing ourselves in quadrant 1, the rocking chair, where we high on mental resolve but low on change and flexibility? Or 2, quadrant 2, where we high on mental resolve and high on agility, and we're just reinventing ourselves? Or are we in quadrant 3, where we low on agility and low on mental resolve too, and we're just in a pity party, that it's just a bad place and it's just everything so bad? Or are we high on agility but low on mental resolve? We're just doing it because we need to tick the boxes. Okay, Eden, lovely, great stuff. Eden, feel free to unmute yourself.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Thanks, Eden.
Oh, good morning.
Good morning to you.
Yes. Oh, lovely cup of coffee. I have one as well.
Yes, it's lovely.
I think for us, in terms of my business, with my business partner, we've had to really take on the approach of quadrant number 2, so the high mental resolve and high agility. But also purely because it was like we had to sink or swim. So I think it was a fight or flight response, especially from the beginning of lockdown. And then I think after month 1, month 2, month 3, we started feeling huge amounts of fatigue, that fatigue that you were speaking about in terms of the just the different types of anxiety. And I do feel that level 3, us being able to get out of the house at least, was very helpful. But still, our productivity levels, it's really a push for us in order to, the resolve has to be very high. And I think more than ever now, we have to, we are having to recalibrate, like come back to the drawing board. Okay, what needs to be done? We're finding it, both of us needing a lot of time to just acknowledge that we are not as productive and that this is what's happened. Now that, the dust is kind of settled. But yes, we've had to be very agile because we realize that our lives depend on it.
Sure. Thank you so much for that, Eden. That's really, it's really positive. It's really positive. I mean, that is just, that quadrant, obviously the ideal quadrant to be sitting in is within that quadrant 4. Quadrant 2, my apologies, is to be sitting in quadrant 2. Where we're sitting in that, trying to reinvent ourselves all the time, because in order for us to, we have to be innovative. And I think we've mentioned this in prior webinars. It's about reinventing ourselves and being innovative and creative through this time. But as you rightfully say, Eden, it's, the fatigue sets in, and that's the reality. The fatigue is setting in, and it's like our productivity is decreasing. And something that I found with our team at ELO is that, we haven't been exempt ourselves. I was chatting to a colleague, not a colleague, I was chatting to an associate that we would normally work with. So it's another audit firm that we normally work with yesterday. And he shared with me, he said, Mario, it's been the worst month for us. He says, so he contracted COVID about a month ago. So he personally contracted COVID a month ago, and therefore he couldn't go into the office. Subsequently, he shares an office with another firm, and one of the guys from the other firm contracted COVID and passed it on to his staff. 2 of his key staff are at home because they've contracted. So he has got 4 staff. 2 of the 4 staff have contracted COVID, so they are, they have to go into isolation. So an additional staff member, so a 3rd staff member, has had to be hospitalized for COVID as well. Also contracted COVID, hospitalized for COVID. He was then left with 1 staff member. So the dust then settled. So 3 of them came back to work on Monday. The one is still in hospital. And he then said to me, one of his staff members then resigned. They've got another job. All in this time. And he says it's been the hardest thing right now. That's what he's experiencing. And at ELO, we haven't been exempt from this. We also experiencing the same thing. As a result, one of the tactics that we've had to put in at ELO has been to engage and appoint a trauma counselor to counsel our employees during this time. So what we've had to do is appoint a trauma counselor to deal with the staff, because they're facing their own traumas right now, because this is a trauma. It's not normal. What we're experiencing right now, it's unprecedented. It's uncertain. And so there's some trauma that's happening. And so, right now we've had to do the same thing with our staff. Get a trauma counselor in to counsel our staff through this time. And we as ELO obviously have had to pay for it. But what I've seen is a direct correlation or direct impact so what I've seen is initially before the counseling, the productivity had decreased, staff's productivity had decreased. And so I started seeing my numbers decreasing. Having paid for a trauma counselor, I've seen staff now starting to pick up on their productivity slowly, and then, start feeling better about themselves. And so therefore, but it's a slow process. It's not an overnight process. Thanks for that, Eden. Thank you for sharing that with us. I think that was really good. Thanks for that. We actually all need, we all need to start looking at counseling for ourselves as well, I think, because it's a trauma that we're experiencing right now. Okay, so let's just go back to our screen. So, and sharing our screen. So this is pretty much, looking at these, looking at the quadrants. And where are you? So my question to you is this morning is, where are you? Where are you in terms of these quadrants? And I think one has to, when one looks, reflects, does some self-reflection, it's really just, to be honest with yourself. Where are you? We all know where we would like to be, which is quadrant 2, and reinventing ourselves. And, obviously, more, in our webinars, I mean, we've kind of been given the tools to navigate ourselves through this time. And it's, so the question is, yes, we want to get to quadrant 2, but where are we right now? Where are we? I mean, for me, at times, I find myself, and I think this is something also to realize, is that moment by moment, we're going to find ourselves, because of things changing so quick, we're going to find ourselves fitting in all the different quadrants. I think personally, I think that's something that I've seen, because there's sometimes where I'll have a pity party, and it's a natural, it's a natural human thing to have a pity party. But sometimes then I find myself moving into quadrant 4, where my mental resolve may be, man, I have to do this, but we have to make the changes right now. So I think often, what I'm finding is I'm often finding myself in quadrant 1, in that rocking chair, rocking chair approach. And really that's where I find myself personally. And so I'm obviously striving for quadrant 2, and that's where I would like to be. But right now, I'm obviously finding myself, and I'm being honest and authentic, is right now I'm finding myself in quadrant 1. So what is your mental resolve to agility? And I think that's something just to ask yourself right now, because remember how you move forward, and that's the very important thing, everybody, is how we move forward and how we make a success of something will really depend on where we sit in terms of these quadrants. I'm going to say it yet again. How we move forward and what success we make of how we move forward is really where we sit in terms of these quadrants. I think this quadrant these quadrants are critical to it's a critical success factor to how we're gonna, where our businesses will be, because it's how we see ourselves. And remember, we are limited. Our business decisions are limited by our thought pattern and our mental resolve. So very important. Okay, so we're going to move forward. Obviously, the next is obviously when we move forward to the grow, then we have to prune. As I said, we have to make those uncomfortable decisions. There's some uncomfortable decisions that one has to make. And in doing so, it may be, some of these uncomfortable decisions may be, staff, dealing with staff matters, dealing with clients, and all of that, dealing with various difficult decisions right now. And being honest in this time as you make that decision. Okay. So as we covered, we mentioned in a prior webinar, we said growth is in the pruning. As I spoke to you regarding this client of mine that spoke to me about, he certainly had to prune. He's had to cut his business. He's had to cut his staff complement from 35 to 21. That's pruning. That's hard. It's not easy. It's not easy telling someone that you no longer have a job anymore. That's the real authentic thing. It's not easy telling someone that, your job has now become redundant and you've got a family to support. It's not easy. But really, right now, it's about being honest. And really, it's, as I said, we're often going to find a head-heart conflict, but it's about making the best decision for your business to remain sustainable. So, pruning, what does it mean for us in small businesses? What does this, as I'm saying to you, this client of mine is a small business. He's not a big business. Yes, he had 35 employees, but he's still regarded as an SMME. What redundant processes, what redundancy are there in your processes? have you looked at your processes? Have you considered your processes in your business? You know, for those that are, you know, remember we spoke about lean, you know, operating leanly. You know, looking at your processes, and if there's duplications in your, you know, if there's duplication in your processes, it's about cutting out those duplications. And sometimes cutting out those duplications means that there'll be redundant employees. And that's what many companies are finding right now, is that people can operate on skeleton staff, and businesses can operate on skeleton staff right now. Okay. The next thing, obviously, is looking at your fixed costs. You know, look, I think in one of our webinars, we brought in some attorneys to assist. I mean, this week I've been in meetings with one of my clients. Probably yesterday I was in a meeting for 3 hours, you know, with a client, and one of the things is his rental costs, where his landlord is just one of his landlords are just being ridiculous, where they're not prepared to consider. I mean, his business has been closed. For the time of lockdown, he was closed for 2 months, and his landlord was not interested in even meeting him halfway, you know. And instead, the landlord, and as I said right now, there's no compassion. Instead, the landlord are trying to seek liquidation. I mean, what craziness is that? Even though the company is not insolvent. And then just in terms of pruning, obviously the lean operation, it's very important right now is that we try and make our operation as lean as possible. You know, where we were sitting with, now's the time to get rid of the dead wood, you know, but pruning or running a lean business will really ensure the sustainability of it into the future. Very important. So where, you know, where, as I refer back to this client of mine, where he had 35, he can operate with 21. And to be honest with you, in cutting, sometimes you have to consider even your heavy, you know, your heavy up, your top heavy, you know. So when you're looking at your salary cuts, look, you know, it may even be some of your highly paid managers that are not productive, that are not adding value right now. And yes, it's hard, but in order to grow, sometimes we have to prune. So lean thinking is really about bringing out the best in your business. Very important right now. Very important. Obviously, I thought that particular client would be on the webinar this morning, because he did register for the webinar, and so I was going to ask him, you know, just to give some feedback regarding his implemented strategy. If there's anybody on the webinar that's implemented our strategy this morning, please raise your hand. We would love to hear from you. We'd love to hear from you as to, you know, if you've implemented our strategy on our prior webinars, what the impact has been in your business, and whether it's been positive, whether it's been negative. Obviously, let's be authentic. Whether it's been positive or negative, let's chat about it. Feel free to chat about it. So if there's anybody, yes, if anybody in the webinar this morning that has implemented our strategy, please feel free. I do know that the other client was meant to be on the webinar this morning, and yeah, he's unable. He didn't make it this morning. So just feel free to share with us this morning. Great stuff. I'm going to allow you to speak. Great stuff. Can you unmute yourself? There we go.
Hi, Mario.
Hi, Shawan. How are you doing?
Good, thanks. Good.
Good.
Yeah, just some of the things that we've had to implement. Well, first of all, took that advice, and from you, we took advantage of that holiday
Yes.
payment plan.
Yes.
For the business, and
Yes.
it did help. It did help
Yes.
a lot.
Yes.
And also just to with the coming up to Joburg, and then
Yes.
work that was promised, and
Yes.
we came straight into lockdown, so
Sheesh.
it was quite a challenge for us. And
Sure.
there were jobs we were promising, and then we didn't get the jobs because
Yes.
of the lockdown.
Yes.
So we found ourselves in a place where client he wasn't able to take a salary.
Yes.
So I think for the last 4 months, he hasn't
Yes.
taken a salary.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's been quite a challenge, but
Sure.
getting through, just as you say, putting things in place,
Yes.
and yeah, just I think
Sure.
just for us, it's just like walking by faith, should
Sure.
I say?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And just putting your feelers out there. And I think the
Yes.
COVID has really taught us to
Yes.
extend ourselves, to stretch ourselves.
Sure.
So really trying to get
Sure.
into different avenues. So
Yes.
in a way it's been good,
Good.
and
Okay.
we've
Yes.
learned a lot from it. Yeah.
Sure. Great stuff. I'm glad to hear. I'm glad to hear. Obviously, I'm glad to hear that you've also used some of the payment holidays. I know that there's still COVID funding available as well. Your COVID loans,
Yeah.
that is available still, and banks are. So what has happened is, I think that's part of the 500 billion that government promised.
Mm-hmm.
So there is still that funding available. Obviously, for some, it's a last resort because you then going into debt.
Yeah.
The debt, obviously your rates are favorable. So your rates are, I think they're giving prime lending rate, and you paid off you paid off over 60 months, which is 5 years, and you would only start paying it from month 6. So they give you 6 months to obviously get through it, and then they would start deducting the. So there is that available, but I often say to clients that must be your last resort. Last resort before, because you are incurring debt if you can, and that's where Melissa was speaking about cash is king. Obviously, right now we're in COVID right now, but prior when we do come out of this, it's really ensuring that one builds reserves, because companies that have reserves right now, those are the companies that are making it through this time and surviving through this time. And sometimes your reserve or access to cash, maybe it may be an overdraft facility, or some funding available. So those are the kind of things that one should consider. One could look at. Thank you for your feedback, Siobhan. Thank you so much for that. Anybody else would like to share? Sorry, just in terms of our, prior, sorry. So you have something else you want to share?
Sorry?
Is there anything else you'd like to share?
Yeah, sorry, just lastly, I think,
Yes.
like you say, those reserves,
Yes.
For us, the reserves were the rentals on property.
Yes.
That really helped us a lot. So,
Yes. Yes.
like you're saying, to have different options
Yes.
in the business. So it's, it really came through for us.
Good.
But at the same time, like you're saying,
Yes.
compassion, you have to weigh the two, compassion and the business. So it's a tough one, because as much as you want to help tenants, you yourself as a landlord are also in a situation.
Yes.
So it's a tough one.
It's a hard one.
Yeah.
It's a hard one. But sometimes I also believe that it's not a, because I think some tenants may want, they may want it all in their way, and I believe that it's a relationship here. So it's really about looking at the long-term impact of your relationship, and sometimes about meeting each other halfway, and I think that's something that we've had to learn during this time is really meeting your tenant halfway. If there is a problem, meet them halfway, as opposed to all in one direction or all in another direction. But then you're both benefiting, And I think walking
Yeah.
away that you both benefit from the situation.
That's it.
Great stuff.
Thanks, Mark.
Okay, thank you so much. So yeah, anybody else would like to raise a hand, share some stuff? Oh, we've got another hand. Brenda, please feel free to unmute yourself.
Thanks, Mario. Mario, whatever you're saying is so wise, and it's just such a privilege being involved. And I'd like to add to what you've just said. Plus, there are all sorts of things that are relevant. Perhaps, near the end, we'll have an opportunity to say that too.
Yeah.
But you've just said something really important, is about talking to the tenant, or as a tenant talking to the landlord.
Yes.
And I think this runs right through, is
Yes.
how important communication
Yes.
is right now.
Yes.
And,
Yes.
as
Yes.
you've been saying too, you can't stagnate,
Yes.
but you've got to keep communicating. We're in
Yes.
isolation. We
Yes.
haven't got that social contact.
Yes.
We're communicating with people
Yes.
virtually,
Yes.
which is not the same as one-on-one.
No, it isn't.
But people cannot stagnate in their communication.
Yes. Yes.
Because you've got to, as you've been saying, you've got to sustain the relationship.
That's right.
So that taking
That's right.
action ties in with your models too, but
Oh, wow.
just in all aspects of our business, stay visible.
Yes.
And we battle to do that because we can't socialize, we can't get
That's
out
right.
there.
That's
but
right.
just talking to whoever, to your debtors, to your creditors, to
That's
your
right.
staff,
That's right.
keep people informed that you're there and you're trying. And yeah, it's all in what you're saying, Maria. So well done, and thank you for sharing.
Thank you, Brenda. Thank you so much for that. Thank you for saying, and just to add on to what Brenda's saying now, one of the things that I find is that I'm a social being, and during this lockdown, it's been really difficult because one can't be out there speaking to, and I love just having a cup of coffee with the client and chatting about your business, and chatting, how things are going, and advising. That's something that I love doing. And during this time, it's been really difficult to not be able to do that, But what I've consciously had to make a decision in my business is that I now need to take some time out in my day and allocate time to my clients and give them a call and find out how they're doing, find out how it's going. And that's something that I'm doing personally, So Brenda, just adding on to what Brenda's saying, just in terms of communicating, and right now you may just having that cup of coffee. Well, you can't have it physically, so having a virtual cup of coffee like I would be having this morning is something that I'm having to do. And the more and more I do it, the more and more I get back to that norm, that prior to COVID norm, somewhat. And I feel better about myself, because that's something that obviously for me is that for me is has been a biggie. And so I think that's for me, that's certainly something that I recommend, just in line with what Brenda's just mentioned now, that communicating with clients, with staff. I mean, with our staff at ELO, we have a check-in session every other day. So Monday, Wednesday, Friday, we have a check-in session just to find out how staff's doing, and obviously at the lower levels, from an operations perspective, they check in daily with the staff to see how they're going. Obviously at my level, it's every other day. I check in with the staff, how they're going, and then also check in with the management once a week, how the scheduling is going, how the debtors are going. So it's constant communication. So we now have reached almost the end of this webinar number 6. I would like some, obviously, we'd like some feedback, just in terms of, does this time suit you? Any recommendations? Any recommendations? We'd love to hear back from you, some feedback, just in terms of recommendations regarding these webinars. not so much so recommendations in terms of time, logistics, recommendations in terms of what you would like to see. Feel free to to put it into the chat, so that we can to put your feedback into the chat, so that we can obviously copy and paste feedback and then kind of pivot our webinars such that it meets. But if you feel free to share, raise a hand, share as well. Feel free to share during this time. Also, if you have any questions regarding what we've discussed this morning, feel free to share. One of the things that we hope that we will be rolling out at ELO. So ELO has there's two parts to our business. The one part is obviously the compliance part and making sure that tax returns are done, VAT returns are done, all the compliance side is done from the respective acts. But the other part that we're trying to grow within ELO is the value add part, is the consulting, business advisory, mentoring side of ELO. So one of the models that we are implementing is we'll be starting masterclasses. So going into the future, we just keep your ear to the ground, keep your ear to social media, to WhatsApp groups. We'll be starting masterclasses going forward, where we take what we've heard in the webinar, and the webinar is obviously at a very high level, and we now start beginning to drill into stuff, but within your businesses. So we start applying what's happening in the webinar into your businesses per se. And then, so that's your master classes, and then we can take that. We're also willing to offer, so that's because master classes will be in a group session, and then we start drilling down into one-on-one consulting at a business level. So we'll also be offering those kind of services as well. So just keep your ear to the ground. That's what we'll be doing going forward. Obviously, the webinars will continue to be a free webinar going into the future. However, masterclasses and one-on-one consulting is a paid service. But yeah, so just keep your ear to the ground. If you have any questions, please feel free to raise your hand right now. We've got a minute to go. Feel free to raise a hand. Yeah, and just if there's anything you want to share, now's the time to do so. Okay, so no hands, or just leave a message in the chat for us. That's also, if you don't want to have a chat right now. But once again, thank you for making the time this morning to sit with us and hear kind of what's going on, and sharing and just being honest with each other right now. Yeah, and so if you've got anything to share right now, please feel free to do so. Anybody would like to share, raise a hand, and then obviously we'll take it from there. Great stuff. Okay, so there's everybody. Thank you guys. It's 9 o'clock. I don't want to take up too much of your time. Enjoy the rest of your day. Have a productive day, a productive week. God bless. Take care. Bye.